Hello, this is the Tuesday, February 1st, 2022 edition of the European History Lectures. We have been talking about the various components of Marxism and of socialism in general, which comes out of the trauma of the industrial experience, which includes utopianism, which is the belief that by force of will we can create a better society and a better person to live in it. Romanticism, which is the notion that life is about passion and not merely reason. Modernism, which is the belief that new is inherently better than old because new is presumably refinement of those things which have come before. And only those who are without vision can't see that. There's a descriptive quote about modernism and about utopianism that was made at the funeral of presidential candidate and New York Senator Robert F. Kennedy. Robert Kennedy was the second Kennedy brother to be assassinated in 5 years in the 1960s. The elder brother, John Kennedy, was assassinated in office as president. The youngest brother, and their eldest brother had been killed in World War II. The youngest brother, Ted Kennedy, made the eulogy, and he was going to carry the Kennedy mantle for the rest of his life. The Kennedys are royalty within the Democratic Party. And so this funeral was national news, the assassination of Robert Kennedy, who plausibly could have become the next Democratic nominee for president, maybe the next president, was big news. And Ted Kennedy's speechwriter had him say this. This was his favorite quote of Robert F. Kennedy, of his brother. There are many who look at the world and ask why. I look at the world and ask why not. Now, what that is supposed to be, if you don't intuitively understand the meaning of it, is a statement of hope. There are people who look at the world and ask why and wonder why. And what they're doing is they're looking at the suffering, the needless suffering that we visit upon ourselves as a species, as groups, and as individuals. And anyone who is a reasonable person would see how needless much of our suffering is. And this is not a political stance, that's reality. But what the idealist says is they look at the world, at the possibility for a new utopian order, and they say, why not? So the assumption that this kind of left-wing idealist makes, the leap of faith that they make, is that suffering may seem to be inevitable, but it's not. Suffering, the needless kind of suffering, occurs because human beings are not bold enough to step out of the known into the unknown, are not courageous enough to ride the winds of change away from the well-navigated rocks and shoals that are mapped into the uncharted waters of a better future. So there is this romantic element connecting that idea that says that a socialist revolutionary of any stripe is engaged in a brave quest. Welcome. Dropped on my desk. To remake the world and remake man to be fit to live in a better world. So all of this is happening. It's all a part of this effervescent bubbliness that is socialism. And the means by which socialistic progress occurs is through dialectical materialism. Conflict, thesis versus antithesis, produces a synthesis, which itself becomes a thesis, meets a new antithesis, becomes a new synthesis. So conflict is what brings change and improvement. Because conflict awakens people to the inherent injustices in the world and forces the just to take action. Now, is that an unreasonable stance? That people do not just decide to become heroic? People don't usually spontaneously step up. Often, except for those people who are naturally megalomaniacal, in other words, who are naturally ambitious and power hungry, most people are happy to be left alone. But when the world is so unjust or unpleasant that it shakes up your personal life, at that point people step up and engage in courageous action. That's normal. I loved my old school in Maine. I had taught there for 13 years. I planned to spend my entire time there, retire there. I had a nice house on an acre of Maine forest land. I was chairman of the history department. I wrote letters to the local paper, and I was satisfied with my job because I was allowed to teach the way I wanted to teach. Suddenly, the entire management of my old school changed, and the new managers were absolutely dedicated to the new approaches to education, which I have fought against since I got into education in the 1980s originally. So I left without another job. I resigned, and I worked as a sub for a year, and my wife and I paid a hefty financial price. We lived in economic freefall. But what happened was that as I was looking for work come on in, go ahead and work. I'm just going to keep talking. As I was working as a sub in Portland, Maine, I looked for work in Maine, New Hampshire, Montana, Idaho, and I found this place. And this place needed someone, and they chose to pick someone like me. My wife gave up the state where she had lived since she was in 4th grade. I gave up the house. We gave up all of that, and we came here just in order to, thank you guys, come in anytime. Just in order to have the freedom to do my job as I needed to do it. This is a much better school. And I don't mean academics. That's true too. And it's partially better because you are here, because you choose to be, or because your family forces you. But it's also a better school because it's a school that exists to have traditional teaching produce superlative students. I would never have chosen to leave my old school. I was forced to, by conscience. And in doing so, I left a state that had quickly become blue, a state that had compromised voting rights, a state that I was no longer comfortable in, and a school that was rapidly changing into something I couldn't be a part of. I came here because I needed to, as if God kicked me. Now, that's a small story, not a particularly heroic one either. But what it indicates is that most people who understand why people do things, who understand human nature enough to talk intelligently about it, appreciate that human beings usually react rather than act first. Please make sure you're not sound. Human beings usually react to changing circumstances. So what Marxists say is that those circumstances that produce the most change are circumstances of conflict, because those circumstances of conflict bring out the fighting spirit in people, the desire for justice, the willingness to tear open old wounds in order to properly clean them and stitch them so that they'll heal right. Whereas left alone, most people would let old wounds fester because it's too much trouble to reopen old wounds. I hope I'm making this clear. Materialism, of course, is the conviction and the assertion that humanity is a physical creature and that this spirit conscience stuff is a bunch of hooey, a bunch of hypnotic, seductive nonsense designed to trap people in a lie. We are bodies, and we have a duty to help make more just a society that's going to provide for the physical needs of people. And if you take care of people's physical needs, the rest, whatever they are, will follow. This is bolstered by the psychologist Maslow, who I hate. But Maslow's hierarchy of needs is something that you will all learn if you take even the most rudimentary psychology course. And what Maslow argues after his studies is that if you feed a human being and clothe a human being and make sure the human being is reasonably healthy, if you give that human being shelter, if you provide for the basic physical needs of the human being, then the human being can engage in the discretionary activities of art and culture, of dance and song and everything else. But if people are starving or if people are at existential risk, they're not going to worry about that. I fundamentally disagree. And I disagree because I've studied history, and there are people who are starving, and what is most important to them is those intangible things of art, culture, religion, and belief. But Maslow's hierarchy, which is a part of psychological lore, is a justification for socialism and for materialism, because it argues that culture is a luxury produced by people who have enough food. And that if people stop getting enough food, culture will fall apart. Bless you. There's some truth to that, there's some that's not, but I think that the assumption that physical needs trump everything else is questionable. But it's the notion that materialists cling to the most. Physical needs trump all others. So any questions before we move on into future things?
So do you think he was referring to society as a mass, as a whole?
Well, he was referring to individuals. He was, and individuals comprise society. So if individuals are primarily motivated by physical needs and their satiation, then society, whatever people say, really functions on the basis of economic need. Über alles, economic need overall. I don't think history bears that out. But that is his statement, and his statement is used by materialists and socialists to justify the accretion of power in the hands of a government that can make sure that a person who can make sure that a person's physical needs are met. As if once a person's physical needs are met, they'll sit on a toadstool like a poet and just produce wonderful verse. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions, thoughts, observations, objections, rants, declamations? Yeah. Thank you for rants and declamations. I knew you'd say something.
So like, where do they find their will to live? Like materialists, just because like they, like having something to believe in. Always.
I'll tell you, everyone's different, but I've been near death a couple of times in my life. Probably the most vivid time, I was coming home from a triple shift at Bristol Myers, where I worked as corporate security. I had just gotten off the highway and gotten onto Route 5, which in Connecticut is sort of like Route 95 here going through Coeur d'Alene. And I was driving down, and it was an ice storm. It was dark. It was one of those nights that, because of the falling snow and ice, rain, it was difficulty seeing. And I was driving by a place that had a chemical plant on the other side of a railroad track. There was a truck, basically a siding where trucks stopped, and then the road. So I was driving this way on the road, and all of a sudden a truck turned its lights on when it was in front of me. It had pulled out, not seeing me, and I noticed it as the cab was turning and the trailer was behind it. I was going about 40 miles an hour. So I did what I could to control the crash, but the car was going to crash into the right rear corner of the cab, the tire, the bumper, all of that. I was driving a large Chevy Malibu 1979, big box car. The engine accordioned in to within a yard of my body, and it wasn't designed to do that. Basically, the steel on the truck was so strong compared to the steel that made up my car that it broke the engine block or shifted the engine block. In the moment that that crash occurred, it was about 3 or 4 months before I was going to get married. It was the late winter of 1990. Yeah, so it was January, February, March, probably February of 1990. I was going to get married in July. And I remember in my mind shouting an outraged no, because I wanted to live to be married. I wanted to live to have a future. And my life did pass before my eyes in that moment. All of the things I had done that came to mind, all of the things that I wanted to do that I would never get a chance to do if I died in this stupid car wreck. As it turns out, the engine collapsing saved me. I had some minor injuries. They didn't have to, they had to get something to pull me out, but it wasn't the jaws of life. They just had to pry the door open because it had sealed shut. There was fuel all over the place, and luckily I was a smoker at the time. It didn't occur to me to light a cigarette to calm myself down, because when you're surrounded by gasoline, that's a bad idea. In that moment, I wanted just one more day. An animal usually doesn't want to die if they're killed by an accident or a predator. There are animals that live long enough so their body doesn't work properly. They're ready. They're ready to move on, whatever that means. Human beings are the same way. But a materialist will find the will to live a worthy motivator, and certainly enough. At least enough to keep going. I tried it once. It doesn't work for me. But for a lot of people it does. Which is one of the reasons why, by the way, so many people are risk averse today. You compare us as a society during the 1930s and 40s, during the Great Depression and World War II, and we were overwhelmingly Judeo-Christian. That means that if you were a practicing Jew or Christian or Muslim or any religious person, you understand that this is a temporary situation, that you're not going to last forever, that death is inevitable, and that death is a part of life. It's normal. It's not something to be terrified of. It is not something to be embraced before its time, but it's not something that's unnatural. Everyone dies. Everyone. So, when faced with the prospect of a pandemic that's not the Black Plague, that's not killing people like Ebola or a flesh-eating virus, it seems to me that we have gone ridiculously overboard in giving up freedom in return for an illusion of security. I can certainly be wrong about this. Those of you who believe that all the steps we've taken, closing businesses, mask mandates, vax mandates, fine, we disagree. But what stands out to me isn't so much the policy disputes, it's the fervor with which some people are actually saying in public something that Americans would never have said 50 years ago or 70 years ago, which is, it's worth it to give up a little bit of freedom to gain a whole lot of security. Franklin and Jefferson both talked about this, and what in effect they said, I'm going to paraphrase both of their quotes, is that any person that's willing to give up freedom for security will achieve neither and will deserve, will lose both and will deserve neither. Anyone who is willing to give up freedom for security will lose both and will deserve neither. Now, every citizen in every society makes a Rousseauian social contract where you give up certain things in return for the benefits of society. But one of the things that people just don't understand, those of you who believe that the science, a monolithic dogmatic truth, says that all of these government interventions make sense, there is a presumption that people who don't agree with you are just morons. Anti-scientific, anti-intellectual morons. Well, we may be morons, but there's a philosophical point of view that says that unless you are faced with the Black Death or a flesh-eating, highly communicable Ebola, you don't close society down. You don't suspend freedom. That if you do that, you're taking a chance. Because many people on my side don't expect to live just one more day. Or if we were in a position like that, we might not give up everything in order to have that one more day. In other words, and I'm saying it badly, because I didn't expect to talk about this, there are things worse than death. Dishonor is one of them. Slavery is one of them. So, if you are fervently for making society safer, good for you. We may or may not agree, but good for you for caring enough to have an opinion about it. But understand that those who disagree with you are not saying that you're wrong about trying to keep people safe. They're saying, in many cases, maybe not eloquently, that there are things that we should not do in order to keep us safe from this, if those things will erode our freedom. And we have concerns on that regard. So, there. You got me on something of a sidetrack.
You
not
said
really.
rant, so I gave you what you
Thank you, yes. I'm just a wind-up toy. You just wind me up and I go. Okay. Socialism, communism, Marxism, Leninism, communism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, Xi Jinping thought. All variants of socialism, National Socialism, Italian fascism, all variants of socialism have certain things in common. All of them are utopian. All of them are modernist. Many of them are romantic. Most of them are materialistic. These are sort of universal things. Most American social progressives, most European social democrats are also utopians. They are modernists. They believe that we can move towards a better world. But they're not communists. Not at all. So let's talk about some of the things that Marx writes about in Das Kapital, which is going to distinguish communist socialism from all others. So now we're going to talk about what is much more characteristically communist as opposed to general socialist. First of all, Marx looks at society and he says that there is a fundamental truth about all human beings. And that fundamental truth is not their faith, it's not their race, it's not their ethnicity or their nationality, it's not their culture, it's not their language. It's their social class, their social economic class. Your class determines your destiny. Your class determines your identity. So what is this thing called class? It's what you do for a living. It's how you interact with the economic world. It is how you draw resources and how you make a contribution. Now, there are 4 Marxian classes. 2 in lower case are pre-industrial, and 2 in uppercase letters are industrial. So we start out with the lower class of the pre-industrial age. The lower class of the pre-industrial age is the peasantry. The peasantry are the farmers, the serfs, the slaves, the peons, the peasants. They are countrified, agrarian producers. They grow the food. And they are at the bottom of what Marx calls the age of feudalism. The upper class in the pre-industrial period, the aristocracy, are the kings, the emperors, the grand dukes, the princes, the counts, the barons, the knights, and their warriors. The aristocracy rules as the peasantry serves because of birth. One is born an aristocrat. One is born a peasant. The only exceptions to this are the towns, but in the Middle Ages, in the pre-industrial world, the towns are so small and insignificant compared to the broader population that they don't matter as much. The future is going to be made there, but at the moment, in the age of feudalism, the towns are just exceptions. The rule is, our aristocracy rules the peasantry. The peasantry serves the aristocracy. Both are rural, both are dispersed, both are traditionalist, both are religious. Peasants and aristocrats learn by watching their parents. Peasants and aristocrats are defined by field, by throne, by altar. God has made the social order. Peasants are expected to live within that. So are aristocrats. However, this ruled and ruling class, as industry develops, are going to be displaced by two new classes. We'll start with the upper class of the industrial age, the age of capitalism, as Marx calls it. The bourgeoisie. Oh gosh, for English speakers, this word is a gift that keeps on giving. The bourgeoisie.
That's not push.
It's spelled bourgeoisie, but it's obviously from the French bourgeoisie, which is equivalent to the German bürgerlich, as in burgerish, as in people who live in the burg. So, the bourgeoisie are the townsmen. The bourgeoisie are the people who are ruling now, or empowered or enriched now, because of their personal skill or their family wealth. But mostly it's their personal skill. So while an aristocrat is born to be a baron, a lawyer has to train. A doctor has to train. An architect has to train. A banker has to train. A carpenter has to train. And I mean the business owner. A blacksmith has to train. I mean the business owner. All of these various people who have specialized jobs and make a decent living, the people who are the entrepreneurs, who come up with the machines, Arkwright and his water frame, Eli Whitney and his cotton gin. These are the people who are the bourgeoisie. And the bourgeoisie give us industry. And Marx says, gives the world industry. Because industry, for Marx, is the key to a better world. Without the bourgeoisie, people would not have built factories. Without the bourgeoisie, people would not have transitioned into a new way of life. The bourgeoisie, skilled people going after wealth, make the new world. But like the old aristocracy, the bourgeoisie are a minority of the people. Like the aristocracy, the bourgeoisie rule over the majority of people who work for them. So who is the new worker? The proletariat. Now, we've used this word before. Proletariats are Romans in the fall of the Roman Republic period, who are the urban poor, the Roman mob, many of whom lost their jobs to slaves. Marx means something different with this old word. In Marxian terms, in socialistic terms, in communistic terms, the proletariat are the industrial working class. So write that down if you don't just know it. The proletariat are the industrial working class. The industrial working class. They are the factory workers. They are the people who operate the lathes, and they operate the machines, and they repair the machines. The proletariat are the industrial working class, as the bourgeoisie are the class of owners and money men who make factories possible. Now, Like the bourgeoisie are different from the aristocracy, the proletariat is fundamentally different from the peasantry. The peasantry is dispersed among the countryside. The proletariat is concentrated into industrial factories and production centers. The peasantry is traditionally educated, and while they know how to do a lot of things on the farm, they don't have experience with formal education. The proletariat has to learn and relearn the world of machines. Because the thing about the world of machines, and if you own an iPhone, you know this, is there's always progress. There's always a new device. There's always a new way of doing things. So the proletariat can't just learn one method of production and one machine and call it good, because in 5 years there's going to be a new machine take that place. 10 years there's going to be another new machine. 15 years another new machine. Maybe this new machine is going to be similar, maybe it's going to be different. But the proletariat has to be adaptable. The proletariat has to be able to learn new things. And by learning new things, I don't just mean look, see, pigeon. Like, oh, I turned knobs 3 times. No, I mean understand the machine. Maybe you don't have the math to understand the blueprints, but you understand not only how the damn thing works, but why it works, and how it fits into the broader production line. A proletarian will know more about his work than a peasant will in this sense. A proletarian has to be able to adapt and change and discard old skills and learn new skills. So because of these differences, the proletariat is concentrated, the proletariat is used to change, the proletariat is used to being organized into a large something that's more than the sum of its parts, which is what a factory production line is. The proletariat is toughened against the loud noises and jarring changes and hyper scheduledness of modern life. None of these things are true of the peasantry. Oh, and to the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, the traditions of throne, field, and altar are pretty irrelevant. They don't matter. Quickly.
You should get an iPhone.
No, I don't even have a cell phone.
You don't have a flip phone?
No. I have a flip phone that I bought when I started flying, and I have it depowered. It's about a dozen years old, and the only time I pay money and activate it is when I'm going flying somewhere, just so I have something to communicate with. The thought, I carried a beeper for several years when I was a manager. I have no desire to walk around available at all times to everyone. People can call my landline and leave a message. They can email me and I'll get back to them when I feel like it. But no, I have no desire to walk around with a little magic box. None. It makes me happy
What
not
about
to.
big magic?
I have a big magic box that I keep at my desk
No, I mean like a
and at home.
mini iPad.
No, no.
That's
I've no interest. None. I'm already deep enough into the artificial world of technology with these videos that I do here in front of you. I have it doesn't appeal to me. And I honestly wonder how this will affect human psychology. Because you all, who are used to this, make it a part of your lives, are living the Jungian concept of the collective subconscious. Because you're walking around with an almost permanent link to the sort of zeitgeist, the sort of thoughts of everyone around you. So, no, doesn't appeal to me. Okay. So these are the 4 social classes, to industrial, to agrarian. But how do they interact? Well, remember, in the Middle Ages, the Holy Roman Emperor was supposed to work hand in glove with the Pope in order to see that the good of Christ's people was achieved. But in reality, they were opponents. Marx doesn't make any bones about it. Classes are at war with one another. They are exploiters and exploited. Is the mouse partner with the hawk that has grabbed him with his talons and is carrying him home to be eaten? Are we friends? Eek, 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 bite me. Oh, wait, you're gonna. Don't bite me. No, it's not a symbiotic relationship. It's not a mutual relationship. I'm gonna eat you, little mousies. Fly, fly. I'm gonna eat you, little mousie, because I like mice. That is predator-prey relationships. And Marx says that is the relationship. The aristocracy is a raptor bird of prey, digging its talons into the bovine, into the herbivorous peasantry. They are food. In the modern tales of sparkly twilight vampires, vampires do not sparkle in the daytime. They turn to dust. Vampires are not these charming people that lead wonderful lives. They are Nosferatu, the undead, the living dead that feed on living people. They are Satan's pawns. They have terrible breath. They are not all sexy-like and charming with Eurotrash accents and tuxedos. No. But in the yes, I am. In the wonderful world of Twicklett, you have Edward and whatever her name is, the girl with one expression. Bella. And Bella loves Edward, and Edward loves Bella, and there's a werewolf too, so it's this Trinity thing. And Edward sparkles. Now, I liked Edward when he was Cedric Diggory at Hogwarts.
Thank you.
And then he died. But no, I did not like... I can't... I actually tried once to watch a Twilight. I couldn't. I just... No!
I don't watch.
I will call him. Can vampires, can Nosferatu, can the living dead, can they actually have relationships with people?
No.
Do you want to anthropomorphize your food? This is Freddy. He's a cheeseburger. Freddy likes long walks on the beach and jazz music. And you know what Freddy really likes? Freddy likes being Freddy. I like Freddy. No, people don't do that. People called it sick. When I was a kid, occasionally we would get lobster. And my mom would bring the lobster home, and while the water was boiling, because she'd throw the lobster in alive into the rapidly boiling water, we would play with the lobster as kids on the floor of the kitchen. So you get this lobster about yay long, and it's the cat's looking at it, beep, 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 and the dog's barking at it, and we're playing with it, and then, oh, it's time. And you drop it in the water, and it dies alive, and then you eat it, and it's tasty with melted butter. To do that, you cannot anthropomorphize it. You cannot make your food into a person beyond a certain point. My wife grew up on a farm after 4th grade. When she first got Alexandra Romanoff, who was her pig, and the pig... her father brought Tina home. Tina was, again, a little 4th grade girl. And, come, we're going to show you something in the barn. Okay, Daddy. Look over there. I see an empty paddock, Daddy, an empty pen. No, you're not looking carefully. Look over in the corner. I see a hole in the wall, Daddy. What? And this little pig-ass butt was sneaking out from under the barn. So, I will call on you. So he runs out and starts chasing this little piglet. Well, they're on Route 1 in Searsport, Maine, which is on the coast of Maine. Beautiful house. But the pig bolts out across Route 1, which is busy. Makes it. He, little Italian guy, basically zoom across. And there's a truck stop across the street. The truckers come out and they stop traffic as 2nd, 3rd, 4th crossing of Route 1, and eventually he does a flying tackle on the pig and gets a hold of the pig. Gina! He carries the pig into the paddock, into the pen. This is what are we going to name her? And she says, Alexandra Romanoff, because she always roams off. That's a Russian joke. So they short it up, and he said, Tina, understand. You can have Alexandra this spring, this summer, but in the fall, around Thanksgiving time, there's going to come a time when it's time to slaughter Alexandra. So understand this is coming and don't get too attached. She says, okay, Daddy. And they feed Alexandra and they play with Alexandra. And October comes and passes, and November comes and passes, and December comes and passes. And just before Christmas, Tina asks her father, Daddy, isn't it time to slaughter Alexandra for me? And her father looks at her and says, slaughter Alexandra? You must be crazy. So what they did is they bred Alexandra and slaughtered all her piglets and slaughtered the rest. But they kept Alexandra around, and she ended up being like a 350-pound brood sow, and she was very valuable. She was a good brood sow. So, can you make friends with your food?
Yeah.
And the answer that Marx has is no. The bourgeoisie eats the products of the proletariat, preys on them. The aristocracy preys on the peasantry. And the only response when somebody's trying to feed off of you is to fight. So class struggle is central. Sir, Miss.
Back when I raised pigs in California,
Yeah.
I went to the fair and I sold them.
Yep.
And for some reason, my grandparents showed up and got in a bidding war with another college.
Just jacking up the price.
And they bought it. And I go over to their house for Christmas a couple months later. And we're having pork.
What's for dinner?
And they're like, I had named my pigs at that time Pinky and Thumb. And they're like, so how's Thumb taste? And I look at my grandfather, I'm like, why?
You know why? Can you tell me why he did that now? Because you're smart. You can figure it out. Why did he do that?
I think it was to kind of make me realize what was going to be happening to the pigs, but I kind of already knew that. But yeah.
You did, but now you knew bone deep. Look, there are a lot of Americans who grow up in the suburbs who think that meat comes from the supermarket. No. Meat comes from cute little animals that are very tasty. And for us to eat them, we must kill them. And for us to eat them at reasonable prices, we must raise them, fatten them up, and kill them in the right way so that their meat is tasty. I'm sure that was in his mind somewhere. I have no question, because...
He's also very cruel, so
yeah,
I think
well,
that's probably another...
there's that too.
But yeah.
Shaughnessy.
Okay, I have a question. How do you feel about there are tribes that play with their food that are cannibals and actually?
Okay.
I'm curious about your thoughts about
My thoughts are that cannibals, like child molesters, need to be wiped out. I have very old-fashioned views about this. If you encounter somebody who's a cannibal, for example, Skyrim, which is a wonderful game, the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, has this cult of cannibals that you can join. That's sick. So whenever I encounter any of them, I kill them all. And I don't eat them. Cannibals are a threat to all of us. So no, what do I think the solution is? I think napalm and firebombing from the air. I can't, no. I get what you're saying. It's an interesting question. But my stance on cannibalism is somewhat fanatical.
Okay.
Yeah, go on.
One more thing.
Okay.
I go on a rant about this all the time.
Yes,
People
yes.
hate me for it.
Okay.
What about
likes to
eat consensual cannibalism? That happened a lot in Germany.
Okay, look.
How do you feel?
Okay. If, God forbid, your plane crashes in the mountains and you can't get out until the end of winter and people die, in a case like that, you might eat another human being just to survive. And the person might very well say, look, I'm going to go so that you guys can survive. That is a case of human beings and extremists. That's an emergency. That's not cultural. That's just people trying to do what they need to do. In a case like that, it happens. During starvation times, like the siege of Leningrad, you got a 999-day siege. The Germans sieged this major city of millions of people. First they ate the Jews, then they ate others.
the Jews?
They ate the Jews. They ate whoever they could. No, the poor people of Leningrad who survived subsisted in many cases off of other people from Leningrad. It wasn't because the people of Leningrad had suddenly lost their civilization. Quite the contrary. It's just that they had no food. And there were lots of dead people. And the whole idea, Hitler was trying to have them morally destroyed before they just physically were wiped out. So true story. And this happens in a lot of cases where you have emergency. So I think in an emergency, it's one thing. But I think to culturally permit it is not a good idea. You asked, I told. We might agree to disagree on that one. Yes. But if I end up... Shaughnessy, understand that if I end up being sick and dying and you're around, I might... I'm joking.
No,
Yes.
I'm not. I will leave.
Go!
Okay, so before this last week, I had never actually seen like a dead animal. Like the only dead animal I saw was like a mouse.
Yep.
Okay? And my friends.
What happened?
So I went to my friend's house, and they live on a ranch.
Yep.
And their friends came over to slaughter some pigs.
Yep.
And I didn't find out till I was on the way over to their house, and I was like,
Too late.
What? And my mom was like, "It's fine. It'll be fine." She didn't have to see the dead pigs hanging from the ceiling. It's fine. But I go into their barn because we were gonna do some roping, and I walk in, and guess what? The first thing I see is
Well, of course.
not a pig hanging from the ceiling.
No?
A pig head steaming on the floor.
Steaming.
Steaming because
Yeah.
it was outside.
Yeah, it's
And
cold.
it was just like I was like, this is disgusting.
Were you acquainted with the pig beforehand? Did you know
I
which
did not
pig
know
it was?
But they like show animals and stuff there all the time. But no, I didn't. know the
Okay.
pig.
See, no, I get what Jackson said, and I get what it is a shock.
Yeah.
And for a night, the thing is, in past ages, people would have this experience. It would be a part of their life. Death is something that most people would know by the time they're your age. Our society is so buttoned up. It's so shielded and sheltered that sometimes adults go out of their way to give you radical connections so that you are not a completely incapable innocent. Yeah.
Well, my friends, they like I said, they show steer, and so he just got this really cute little steer like a couple months ago, and he's adorable. I love him. He's fuzzy, and they have to kill him when it comes time for the fair. And I was like, he's so cute. He's like, yeah, he'll look even cuter in about 6 months in the freezer.
Yep.
I was like,
Yeah. Look, it is either be a vegan or understand that this is part of the world. And there are people who are vegan. It's not my thing, but I can respect at least the attempt. Any other thoughts? So we're leaving with class struggle. What Marx says, and this I've got to finish with. There is nothing more important in life than your social class. Because your social class defines who your allies are, who your enemies are, and what your objectives are. Your objectives, if you are a member of the proletariat or the peasantry, is to overthrow the authorities that keep you in chains. That's your job. So the classes are the most important thing, and the classes engage in class struggle. That's central to Marx's ideas. Okay, we're done. Thank you. Have a good day.